Zen in the car, for the spiritually minded liberty activist on the go. Liketh, shareth, subscribeth. It's what the cool kids do. Let the seeker keep seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will be disturbed. When he is disturbed, he will be amazed. When he is amazed, he will be invincible to everything. And when he is invincible to everything, he will be at rest. Christ Yeshua. Up until this point, in observing the form and function of corporate Christianity, we've used the analogy of praying mantis and spider to get us this far. Surely it's not a blasphemy to shift gears and dialogue of the institution and the victims it consumes to a paradigm that is apparently all the rage these days. The creature of the narcissist in tandem with its unwitting victims of supply. This is appropriate because, unlike the spider, which shows its prey mercy and ends their suffering as soon as possible, that is not the method carried out by the narcissist nor corporate Christianity. Rather, when the creature we call a narcissist sets their hooks inside those unfortunate souls they deem yummy enough for food, they drag out the process for as long as their programming will allow, milking all the energetic supply they can get for as long as they can get it. In this fashion, corporate Christianity is identical, only it calls such supply worship. We can agree that there is no need for us, within the confines of this narrative, to open all the textbooks or editions of the DSM pertaining to narcissistic personality disorder, as it's apparent that the phenomenon is spreading like a plague, and the information regarding it is keeping pace. That being so, feel free to go down the rabbit hole of that research at your leisure. For the context of this chit-chat, we will assume that all of us are currently fully informed as to what the narcissist is, what it does, and why it does them. If this is not the case, my encouragement would be to bypass any self-help life coach information you're bound to come across and go straight to the work of Professor Sam Vaknin and Richard Grannon on this topic. For clarity, any references here to the looped programming, behaviors, causes, or processes one might observe regarding the creature, narcissist, is derived by yours truly from their exhaustive bodies of work, respectively. One of the primary phases of entanglement with the creature narcissist is that of shared fantasy. In this phase, most of the work on the narcissist part is done to stretch out and derive as much gratification as it can from its victim. Shared fantasy is essentially a shared space between predator and prey, where the actual dynamics of the personal relationship journey into grandiose idealization, very far from the shores of reality. It is important to note here that the personal relationships based in fantasy rather than reality are pathological. Therefore, when entering a pathological personal relationship, it must be understood that an individual is either knowingly or unknowingly attempting to build something upon a foundation of dysfunction and dis-ease. Of course, as we know, corporate Christianity has many denominations that provide an illusion of choice. So in painting a picture of the shared fantasy elements within it, I will be using broad strokes. When entering the shared fantasy with Jesus Christ trademark and the company he represents, the world building begins, and a few of the parameters are as follows. The canon of the Bible is limited to the 66 books within its covers. These 66 books are the fullness or complete communication of inspired scriptures from the God corporate Christianity represents. The canon of the Bible is to be viewed as literal history. The canon of the Bible's narrative is to be viewed in a literal manner. Truth is explicitly found within the confines of the Bible and is to be the barometer for anything alleging to be truth from outside of the confines of the Bible. In the event any evidence outside of the Bible is produced that would contradict or disprove that the Bible is literal history, records literal events, or the narrative is to be taken in a literal manner, that evidence is not to be considered anything more than a test of the victim's faith. The narrative of the Bible is that of a monotheistic deity in its relationship to its creation. This monotheistic deity is a triune entity, interacting with its creation in three separate modalities, that of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This monotheistic triune entity is the primary object of the Bible's narrative and is the same primary object from Genesis to Revelation. Upon conversion to corporate Christianity, an introject of Jesus Christ trademark is created within the mind space of the victim, which is the Holy Spirit modality of the triune monotheistic God of the Bible. Again, these are broad strokes indeed, but are sufficient for now to begin to empathize with the worldview produced within the shared fantasy of corporate Christianity. For the observant, it is more than obvious that such a shared fantasy produces a closed system within the victim's thinking. If they are to stay within the confines of this new personal relationship, the efficiency of these parameters offered by corporate Christianity to maintain the hold over its victims is that it nearly reduces the ability to cognitively question most of the fantasy to almost zero. Almost. This closed system of thinking and behavior modification is often called the church, while anything and anyone that does not share the thinking or behavior of the church is referred to as the world. The latter expression is typically applied with disdain, distaste, and dejection. We will reserve testing the structural integrity of these shared fantasies soon enough, but for now, it's best to focus in on the interject version of Jesus Christ's trademark the victim internalizes. For it is this internal imagining of Jesus Christ's trademark the victim believes they are having a personal relationship within the form of the Holy Spirit, not a flesh and blood human being. This, too, is identical to the relationship between the narcissistic creature and its prey. Any perceptions of a narcissist and a victim having a personal relationship are pure delusion, as credentialed academics in the field of psychology will inform you. The narcissist has no self. The environment and events that first put them on the path to becoming the creature, narcissist, disallowed them from individuating in early childhood, and what is used to interact with the world is merely a grandiose false self, a simulacrum of an individual, flesh and blood person with an ego. The narcissistic creature is a fiction with the advantage of a person suit to walk around in, as it were, but not human. Whereas Professor Vaknin would compare the anomaly of the narcissistic creature to that of the replicants from the film Blade Runner, my own thought is that they are more like hosts from season 1 of Westworld in that they operate on loops of their programming or repetition compulsion, unaware of the true nature of their reality. Again, we will have to put off looking closer as to what that loop or compulsory repetitive cycle is down the road a bit, but for now, the key thing to understand is that when you look into the eyes of a narcissistic creature, there is literally no one home. There is no self, ego, or person in which you can have a personal relationship with. Instead, the victim of narcissistic abuse, as well as corporate Christianity, internalizes an image of the object they are in shared fantasy with. For the victim of the narcissist, it is the narcissist's false, grandiose self. For the victim of corporate Christianity, it is the Holy Spirit. In both cases, what is essentially being done is that the victim is accepting within their own consciousness a kind of thought police officer or an internalized big brother that is always watching, always listening, always recording the deeds and misdeeds of the victim. While one may be tempted to think of this Holy Spirit as a kind of imaginary friend only existing within the mind of the victim, I would not make that comparison. Typically, one is aware they have created an imaginary friend, and in this instance, the introjected version of Jesus Christ's trademark the victim interacts with is more of a bridge of consciousness, or how supply or worship is mined and transmitted to the predator that is the God of corporate Christianity. The victim that has been immersed in the shared fantasy parameters previously mentioned, as well as accepted the introjected version of Jesus Christ's trademark within themselves, are ripe for behavior modification moving forward. This aspect of corporate Christianity isn't really kept a secret, merely presented in a different manner than what it blatantly is. Corporate Christianity would present the behavior modification of its victims as sanctification, or having those caught within it to become more Christ-like. On the surface, I wouldn't take issue with an individual endeavoring to become more Christ-like. However, I would raise my hand very quickly to point out that Christ is a title bestowed, not a surname given, and said title is not exclusive to the shared fantasy parameters of corporate Christianity. Corporate Christianity is modifying the behavior of its victims to a specific variation of Jesus Christ's trademark that can only be found within the narrow parameters of the shared fantasy and not at all outside of them. What that means is that a person attempting to modify their behavior to Jesus Christ trademark via the introjected version, the Holy Spirit, is molding themselves into an archetype provided by corporate Christianity, and certainly not a flesh and blood human being that lived or lives. This is, and of itself, to a rational person, negates the entire proposition of having a personal relationship with the God of the Bible at all, as no qualifications for a personal relationship can be met within the parameters and presentation of the person of Jesus Christ trademark by corporate Christianity to begin with. Again, This is very much like the creature, narcissist, and its prey. Interaction is always with an internal image or icon of what is supposed as an actual person. Unlike the narcissistic abuse paradigm, where there is a flesh and blood biological machine one can touch and be touched by, corporate Christianity must compensate this via the Holy Spirit modality of the God they present. While narcissistic abuse in all the terms, phases, stages, and effects seem to be a more modern phenomenon, the mechanism of how it lures victims into shared fantasy for the purpose of implanting an introject inner critic are far from new. Corporate Christianity has been employing the same techniques as the creature narcissist for more than 2,000 years. While many do have the hope of escaping and recovering from their personal entanglements with the narcissist and the abuse their existence brings, sadly, there are countless souls over the past 2,000 years that couldn't escape the same abuse from corporate Christianity. They lived, emptied all the grains of sand from their personal hourglass into the shared fantasy, and died, waiting on the promises they were told Jesus Christ trademark made. All those individuals, all that worship, all that narcissistic supply being consumed by a parasitical organism over the promise of intimacy with a deity that is believed to have written, produced, and preserved only 66 scrolls that are used as the blueprint for the shared fantasy that makes it all possible. Examining the origins and motivations of the blueprint takes a courageous soul indeed if one is to get to the truth of the matter. One wouldn't think it blasphemy to go in search of that truth for themselves, seeing as how corporate Christianity claims to support truth at all costs. Yet, many a truth seeker have found themselves crucified in various ways over the centuries for daring to question the veracity of the shared fantasy from its inception, yours truly being no exception. Yet, the one thing a heretic will always have, even in death, over those who fight, die, and kill over their fantasy is their dignity. Zen in the Car, for the spiritually minded liberty activist on the go. Liketh, shareth, subscribeth. It's what the cool kids do.